All right, so let's get started. First of all, Colleen and I want to say thank you for joining us this evening. We know that it's the first Monday back after a holiday break. It's snowing out and it's cold. So we appreciate you being here, Colleen, myself, and Michelle Wagner. We are all literacy consultants for Wayne Risa and we'll be your hosts for this evening. So as we look over the agreements, we know that it's important to our routines to make sure that we supply a safe and productive environment. So we want to invite you to be engaged in humble inquiry and to be open to ideas that are presented on the table from the team, as well as your colleagues that will be collaborating with you later in the session. We encourage you to make decisions that are in the best interest of children, and we'll be leaning into some best practices as we look over the essentials this evening. And then please stay engaged. I know it's been a very long day, and like we said, that it's snowing outside. And if we're all like our students, as soon as the first snowflake flies, it's really hard to stay focused. So just being mindful of the distractions that are in your space and maybe minimizing those distractions. And then, of course, take care of yourself. If you need to get up and get a beverage, or if you are just finishing your dinner, or if you need to step away, please just go ahead and shut off your video and then take care of your needs. We want to make sure you're comfortable in this space. So let's go ahead and get started. Our outcomes for this evening, there's two. We want to explore some high quality interactive read aloud instructional practices that fit both in remote, face-to-face, and hybrid settings. And then we want to give you a large chunk of time so that you can really lean into each other's expertise, share ideas that are going really well, and then maybe share some barriers and how you overcame those barriers as it lends to interactive read alouds. As always, whether we're in a remote setting or a face-to-face, wherever we're at, we always lean heavily into our literacy essentials. And we would like to always highlight literacyessentials.org. If you have not had a chance to visit the website, we encourage that you do. If you have visited the website, we invite you to go time and time again. There are free resources that are available for K through 12 teachers. Everything is found there, the essential practices document, online modules, and they're adding new resources as we speak. So please feel free to go to this site and explore. But most of our work will really lean heavily into those literacy essentials. As we get started, I want to mention to Dr. Tanya Wright's quote. And the quote came from her article, The Power of Interactive Read-Alouds. And within this article, she shares some of the research that she and her team at Michigan State University have taken part in. And she's a researcher and a professor at Michigan State University, and she's a former kindergarten teacher. And what her research really showed was that with read-alouds, for them to be impactful and for them to be meaningful, we need to make them interactive. So really making sure that we're allowing a space during our interactive read-alouds for students to talk and to really make deep meaning of the text. So we have to be interacting with our students and the text and allowing the students with each other. So we're going to go ahead and drop the link to that article. And I had a professor of mine said, in your non-existent spare time, please check out the article. But it is jam-packed with wonderful information from her research around interactive read-alouds. I'm going to turn it over to Colleen, and she's going to talk about this interactive read-aloud in our remote settings.
Thank you, Mary Lou, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to be part of the session this evening and to learn alongside of you as we explore best practices for interactive read-aloud. And one of the things that we really wanted to dive into is the planning that is required to make sure our interactive read-alouds are most effective and successful. And this chart here on the slide kind of goes through the different roles. So what a teacher might want to do in order to prepare for an interactive read aloud, and then what the student would be doing as well. So you can look on the left-hand side. The first thing would be to model that work that readers do to really think through text and comprehend. So we are actually modeling that think aloud during the read aloud so that students are hearing what's going on inside your mind as you're reading and you're thinking that through. And while you're modeling that, the students are really practicing concentrating on using strategies so that they can understand the text and maybe begin conversations with one another around that text. Another thing to consider is teachers need to really nurture ideas and theories about text. This is kind of a big one because oftentimes we as teachers believe we understand what the text means and how it should be perceived and how it should be looked at. And really what we've come to find is that everyone connects to text in very different ways based on your experiences and your background knowledge. So we really want students to be engaged by responding to each other and responding to the teacher, jotting down notes and having conversations often throughout the read aloud. Another thing to consider is pre-selecting your text so that you are able to plan out where you will stop in very intentional ways throughout the read aloud, maybe to teach a different strategy or a specific skill. And as you consider that planning time, we also need to think about the students and what they will be doing during this time of intentional stopping points, where they can really think deeply about a text and share their thinking on a focused question or skill or strategy that you're teaching. And then lastly, we want to make sure that the teacher is scaffolding children with conversations for work that could come up later on. And so we want to probe students by using talking stems. Oh, I agree with Jace because of what he said. That makes me think of something that happened to me. And this will help to expand children's vocabulary and background knowledge as we have them enter into conversations around text. When we think about a remote environment, there are a few suggestions that we have about read-alouds. A lot of this comes right from that article that Mary Lou mentioned earlier from Dr. Tanya Wright. What we might encourage is that you have at least a minimum, a very minimum of one read aloud a day. Now we know read alouds can happen across the entire day, across all content areas. So be mindful of science, social studies, and math content and how you can incorporate that into a very planned read aloud. But we really would recommend at least once a day having a read aloud. We know when we're in person, we do that quite often. We might read a poem, we might read a nonfiction piece. We want to make sure we're still encouraging multiple read alouds. And of course, going on with the slide from before, making sure our read alouds are very purposeful and planned. Now, I can tell you, I've been one of those teachers before where I've pulled a book off my shelf because I needed to settle my kids down and everybody just needed a timeout. We all know that that happens and it's not very planned. It's just reading the book for pure enjoyment and to calm the classroom down. But we know during an interactive read aloud, it really does need to be purposeful. Can you push it back one slide there, Mary Lou? I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that length of time for the read aloud, making sure that it's not too long. We're going to show you a quick example, but we really want to be mindful of the amount of minutes we're inviting our kids to be interacting on a screen with a read aloud. We certainly don't want it to go too long. Oftentimes we think about their age equals the minutes. So if they're about 10 years old, they could probably stand to listen to a 10-minute read aloud. Also, being mindful of using a variety of text, as I mentioned earlier, and then also thinking about those mentor texts, those texts you go back to again and again to really dive into multiple instructional goals. And these become our friends throughout the entire school year. So don't forget about the beauty and the effectiveness of a mentor text. So what we'd like to show you is just a small little clip about a teacher actually doing some thoughtful planning to prepare for a read aloud.
You use the Post-its to write the general outline of the lesson so that I keep everything in order. And this really helps with the pacing of the lesson. I use Post-its to identify vocabulary words that I want to point out to the students when I'm reading the first time. And I use the Post-its where I want to stop in the middle of a read, pose a question, and then have them turn to a partner. And so it just helps me stay focused. I go through the vocabulary list because I want to see which words are most challenging for my students. And so I actually physically underline the word in the text, and then I write down the definition so I know that that's cue for me when I'm reading it to define it. In part of the planning, I have to think about where the lesson might go based on who my children are. And so I know that because I have several ELs in my class, that we might have to work a lot on making sure that they understand the surface level of the book. And so we need to make sure that those two discussion questions are clear. And then I see where I want to probe, where I think the kids might be able to elaborate on their discussion at the end of the text. So when I was looking through the lesson, I noticed that the third question was about how could the sheep be more responsible the next time they visit the restaurant. And I felt like that one might elicit more opinions. And so I thought that would be a great one to really probe and push kids' thinking into, so we can engage more conversation.
So you can see from the video, lots of preparation before actually engaging in that interactive read aloud, lots of thinking about where my students are, what are their needs, and where to go next with them. We look at the essentials, just as Mary Lou had mentioned, as our foundational piece, really digging into that research about why our instructional interactive read alouds an instructional practice that we really want to hone in on. One of the things we wanted to focus on with you tonight is to really think about vocabulary instruction with a read aloud. And in the K3 essentials, it specifically states describing and modeling strategies for understanding unfamiliar vocabulary. Mary Lou, as you move on to the next one, you'll see that in the 4-5 essentials, there still is direct information about really expanding the vocabulary learning in the context of reading. And then once again, in the grades 6 through 12 essentials, another essential is very, very intentional about building vocabulary and concept knowledge. So this whole notion of building vocabulary within an interactive read aloud is hugely important in all of the essentials grades K through 12. We would like to show you another small clip. This actually comes from the modules from the literacy essentials, just a very small, short clip talking and engaging kids around unfamiliar vocabulary during a read aloud.
And I want you to think about the lion and why the author used these words. The lion came bounding over, sniffed the rock 100 times, walked around and around it, and went away confused, perplexed, puzzled, and bewildered. I saw that little donkey as clear as day. Maybe I'm going crazy, he muttered. So we're looking at these 4 words. Move these over. Can you say bewildered? Bewildered. Perplexed. Perplexed. Puzzled. Puzzled. And confused. Confused. So they all are synonyms again, and they mean the same thing. Can someone tell me what you think those words mean? Lexi?
They mean like you really don't know what's going on.
You do not understand, right? You do not know what's going on. It's an excellent book for vocabulary because there are words that have synonyms with the same meaning, and we can teach one definition and have multiple words that mean that, and that gives students multiple ways to express themselves using a variety of words. There are a lot of opportunities in this book with sophisticated vocabulary words that I know that my students have not had exposure to.
Okay, so we considered the really expanding vocabulary, unfamiliar vocabulary in a read aloud, and Mary Lou's going to take us on into another part of research that will help to lift up that read aloud.
And
So as we move on, we're going to then lift up the comprehension strategies and skills that we can help our students understand using interactive read-alouds. And when we think about the comprehension strategies at the K3 level, in the K3 essentials, we're looking at activating our students' prior knowledge, helping our students understand predicting and questioning. And when there's a loss in meaning, actually having our students understand that there's a loss in meaning and giving them some strategies to fix up or to get them back on track. And then we build to the more complex skills of drawing inferences and summarizing and retell. Now, if we look at the 4-5 essentials, those foundational skills are there, and we are adding on top of those. We're allowing our students an opportunity to learn how to find main ideas through really modeling those behaviors and getting kids to understand summarizing and the way that summarizing helps us to draw in our ideas of what a theme for a story is, or helping us to understand understanding the main points of informational text, and really making the connections between new text and prior knowledge that already exists. And then when we go look at the 6-12 essentials, using all of those wonderful skills and strategies, and then honing in on disciplinary literacy within certain texts. So really apprenticing them into the skills needed to read like a historian, a mathematician, or a scientist. So really modeling for our students and allowing them an opportunity to practice those skills and strategies around comprehension and that making of meaning. So we're to the point in our presentation where we really would like to have you give it a try. So thinking about the pre-planning portion of this and the remote environment that we're currently in, we'd also like to give you another platform that you might not have been able to utilize yet. And that is the platform of Overdrive. I know many of you are probably already using recorded read-alouds by reading aloud and using platforms like Screencastify, but Colleen and I wanted to share with you the opportunity through your local library to use the platform of Overdrive. And in Overdrive, you will find that there's quite a few titles that are read aloud, and they're pre-recorded, and some of them are even read aloud by the authors. So we'd like to share with you this opportunity to view a recorded read aloud and think about what are some of the possible learning opportunities found in this story. So leaning into that pre-planning. If you were to view and listen to this book for the first time, what might be some opportunities for learning? What skills or strategies would you like your students to take away from this mentor text, knowing that you would use it time and time again? So what we'd like you to do is think about possibilities as we play this book for you. It is, in fact, read aloud by the author. So we're going to go ahead and take you through that process. The entire book is a little over 5 minutes. And looking at our time, we won't be able to view the whole book, but notice the features that are involved in this read aloud, this pre-recorded read aloud, and think to yourself, what are some possible learning opportunities I could use with this mentor text? So here we go.
Last Stop on Market Street. Written and read by Matt De La Pena. Pictures by Christian Robinson. For Luna and her two grandmas, Ronnie and Grace, Matt De La Pena. For Nana, Christian Robinson. CJ pushed through the church door, skipped down the steps. The outside air smelled like freedom, but it also smelled like rain, which freckled CJ's shirt and dripped down his nose. He ducked under his Nana's umbrella, saying, "How come we gotta wait for the bus and all this wet?" "Trees get thirsty too," his Nana told him. "Don't you see that big one drinking through a straw?" CJ looked for a long time but never saw a straw. From the bus stop, he watched water pool on flower petals, watched rain patter against the windshield of a nearby car. His friend Colby climbed in, gave CJ a wave, and drove off with his dad. "Nana, how come we don't got a car?" "Boy, what do we need a car for? We got a bus that breathes fire, and old Mr. Dennis, who always has a trick for you." The bus creaked to a stop in front of them. It sighed and sagged, and the doors swung open. "What's that I see?" Mr. Dennis asked. He pulled a coin from behind CJ's ear, placed it in his palm. Nana laughed her deep laugh and pushed CJ along. They sat right up front. The man across the way was tuning a guitar. An old woman with curlers had butterflies in a jar. Nana gave everyone a great big smile and a good afternoon. She made sure CJ did the same. The bus lurched forward and stopped, lurched forward and stopped. Nana hummed as she knit. "How come we always gotta go here after church?" CJ said. "Miguel and Colby never have to go nowhere." "I feel sorry for those boys," she told him. "They'll never get a chance to meet Bobo or the Sunglass Man. And I hear Trixie got herself a brand new hat." CJ stared out the window feeling sorry for himself. He watched cars zip by on either side, watched a group of boys hop curbs on bikes. A man climbed aboard with a spotted dog. CJ gave up his seat. "How come that man can't see?" "Boy, what do you know about seeing?" Nana told him. "Some people watch the world with their ears." "That's a fact. Their noses too," the man said, sniffing at the air. "That's a mighty fine perfume you're wearing today, ma'am." Nana squeezed the man's hand and laughed her deep laugh.
So thinking again, using this platform, and by the way, I wanted to add that there is no charge for the use of this platform, just having a current library card, and you can sign out these titles for 14 days. Thinking about using this platform and some of the strategies we talked about around vocabulary and comprehension, what are some possible learning opportunities found in this story? So we're going to give you a minute to just, I'm going to put 2 minutes on our timer because I really want to have some time to stop and process. What are some possible learning opportunities? We're going to give you some quiet time. If you need to, go ahead and shut off your camera. Just take some quiet time and think about and record some of the learning opportunities. So we'll take about 2 minutes. Okay. I notice people are already entering into the chat some of their ideas for possible learning opportunities for our students. Thank you so much for putting those in. I love that Tori put down listening and smelling the world, metaphors, similes, sensory words and discussions around those and how that lends to imagery, community, thinking again about activating that prior knowledge, whether our students know about what it looks like and sounds like when we're on a bus. Have they had the opportunity to do that? And being able to open up those possibilities for our students. So that social studies and community connection there, comparing characters and describing communities. A lot of great things. When we think about this and we think about that pre-planning piece when it comes to these read-alouds and the extraordinary opportunity we have in a remote environment to stop, move back in the recording, find evidence to support our students' thinking or help them find the evidence. Thinking about how pre-recorded read-alouds can really lend to being interactive as long as they're in that synchronous space. You can preload the read-alouds into your learning management system, but think about the power of pausing, having our students do some questioning, and then going back to that section in the text, having them answer those questions. There's a wealth of opportunities when we have pre-recorded read-alouds. A couple of things that we wanted to tell you: there are many different sites out there that have celebrities and well-known people who are doing read-alouds on picture books. Mel.org has a wonderful selection of informational text that you can get a permalink with, and you can drop those into your learning systems, or you can use those to show the pictures and text while you read it aloud. So there's a lot of different opportunities when we talk about interactive read-alouds and pre-recorded read-alouds. One thing we made for this time, but we aren't, of course, going to have time to do this. We wanted to have you engage in a Jamboard. If you've never used a Jamboard before, it's part of the Google Suite. And the purpose of the Jamboard is to allow our participants, our students, or the people that we're working with to really interact in a collaborative way. So let me go back and see if my link is going to work here. What my plan was to actually have you in a Jamboard look around these possible learning opportunities. What would be possible themes connected to the last stop on Market Street? Change in character, evidence from the text, vocabulary. If we had more time, I would have invited you to use a Post-it note and put your learning opportunities on that, and then go ahead and drag them on there for engagement. But of course, Colleen and I have over-planned, and we want to make sure that we give you plenty of time to have opportunities to share and collaborate with others. So we're going to keep moving forward. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a large chunk of time in breakout rooms, and we want you to have an opportunity to chat with your colleagues. What are some things that you're doing with interactive read aloud in a remote environment or in this face-to-face environment that have been working really well? What are some possible barriers? What are some resources that you'd like to share? So we're going to, in a moment, invite you to join a breakout room, and you'll have 5 or 6 colleagues in the breakout room, and we're going to give you about 20 minutes to share some ideas. And then when we come back, ask you to do a real quick share out about what you learned from your colleagues and what you were able to share.